Salutations ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel, Maniacal Miniatures. In this video I will do a speed painting video of a terrain feature from Games Workshop called the Balefire Vortex. It looks like this, and I'll try and really speed it up and do it in less than 30 minutes. So let's check it out. So here we are guys with the Balefire Vortex, Balefire Vortex even. I have set up some colors here to start with. I'm gonna try to make a quick marble looking slab at the top here, the star. I'm gonna use Incubi Darkness for that as a base. Then I'm gonna shade it with Coelia green shade, and then I'm gonna make little lines like there's in marble with the Cabalite green. I don't know if that'll work, and that's quite a time-consuming technique, even though it's a speed build, so I'm not sure if that's gonna work. For the fire, smoke, magic effect itself here, I'm gonna go with some warg energy for my Aurochs, because this is gonna be used by a Vietnam shaman. So I'm gonna base coat it with Warpstone Glow, and then shade it with Biltine Green. I have an additional one here, because this is almost empty. And then I'm gonna highlight it with the Mood Green to give it that really shiny effect of magic. Then for the base here, I'm gonna go with the Sandry Dust, shaded with the Reichland Flesh Shade, and dry brushed with Terminatus Stone. I'm doing that because if you've seen my showcase of my hobby space, I've already done that with my realm gates. So to tie all my terrain features a bit together, I'm gonna make all these look like sandstone. Then for this entire metal ring down here, and the one around the edges as well, all these little metal bits, I'm gonna go with a lead belcher as a base, because these are Aurochs and they don't use gold or brass. That's more like Stormcast and Corn respectively. And then I'm gonna go with Reeser Rust and Typhus Corrosion on the metal as well, to give it that nice contrasting color to all the greens I'm gonna be using that is very complementary to each other. So here I'm going with a bit of color theory, where I have a lot of different greens and blues that go well together, and then we have the orange to offset that. So that's gonna be exciting. I have cheated a little bit and colored these things down here, these little symbols on the skulls, to remind myself which colors represent which realm, because these are all the 8 realm gate symbols, which if you've seen my showcase videos, you will notice that I've painted the symbols on the realm gates as well in the same colors. So I thought that was a nice little Easter egg or whatever, and I'm using the edge paints for that, just because I like the color of them. Yes, so let's try and get on with it. I have here a really cheap basic brush from any hobby store to get the big pieces done in a hurry. I have a large and a medium dry brush, and GW's dry brushes are not that great, so you could use whatever you want, even old brushes like this. This could be used as a dry brush as well, if it didn't fall off all the time. I have a small dry brush as well. Then I have these, an artificer layer and an artificer layer as well, in small and extra small, for all the fine detailing and the marble effect. I have a large shade and a medium shade brush. I use the medium a lot because it gives me a bit more control. This is a bit daunting to do in the estimated half hour. I'm not sure I can do it, but otherwise I'll try and speed up the video so it will go a bit quicker for you. First off, let's mix this thing. For that we're gonna use this big one. Get some on my palette here. let it hydrate a bit. Oh, it gets that nice skimmed milk consistency, and onwards we go. I know some of you really great painters out there would be screaming at the video at this time, because I'm really just globbing it on there. Of course it's a thin layer, but of course there will be or rather there will be a risk of there being streaks in the paint, because I'm being quite rough with this. But that's alright, because this is a speed painting video, and the whole goal with this thing is, oh, don't use it straight from the pot. I'm still getting used to this wet palette. Because this video is an exercise into getting things done faster, because especially with my own things, I know I'm a procrastinator, so I want to do things just right and be in just the right mood to paint, and in that speed nothing will get done. So I'm challenging my bit here to make things a bit quicker, so I can get something painted on the table, because even if this is less than perfect when it's done, it will still be painted, and that's better than white plastic on the board, or gray plastic for most of you guys. I prime all my models as soon as they're built, while it's good weather, because I live in Denmark, and now we have about half a year where it's not advised to prime, because humidity and frost. We're gonna need a bit more. Now this wet palette has really sped up my my painting process quite a bit. I have made a video reviewing this wet palette, and even seeing it from a bigger perspective, any wet palette will do. I'm just a really big fan of this one because of the mold resistant foam that's in it, which is quite nice when you're allergic to molds. So we're just globbing it on there, trying to get this base coat down quickly. And there we are, I think. It's the outer rim. So it has already dried, because I have 3 lamps right on this thing at the moment, and it's drying the paint out really quickly. So I have to save all these little streaks I've made for moving on. That looks great. Onwards to victory. I think I'm gonna assume that these skulls are actually stone as well, because that'll make it easier for myself. I've seen some paint these as if they were metal. I've seen some paint them as if they were regular skulls of giants, for example. But I'm not gonna do that for the purpose of this video, which is still speed painting. I haven't actually done any of this before, this speed painting, because sometimes you want to get really cozy with it and just take your time and enjoy painting it, but sometimes you gotta drag yourself out by the neck hair and just say, today I'm gonna paint a ton, and for that purpose speed painting is great, because you get a ton done, even if it's to a bit lower standard than you would like. That's still better than just primed, or not primed, just assembled even. And you can always go back and revisit it later. So so you can put some extra detail to it, and when you get better and learn more techniques, you can also go back and as always, you can go back and do edge highlighting later, and additional shades, and do some wet blending on top of the colors you've already put down. This is a bit hard with this one. I think I'm going to revisit that in a bit with the artificer brush. I just gotta spread some of this paint out. I actually find for this sandstone color I'm getting used to with my terrain, that I like to use just one coat. Unless there's some really thin spots, I don't go back and revisit it. Just gonna spread this out a bit and get into the edges here, because that's hard with a big brush. Yes, it is. So it's nice. Arguably, I could have primed this with sandry dust, but it's not a spray I use at all regularly, so I didn't invest in that thing. That might have been clever, but I am not a clever man. Oh, where's that quote from? I believe that's Forrest Gump. I'm not a smart man, he says. That could be it. Oh, I could even do some... If I go back and revisit this, because I don't think I'll do it in this video, because that'll take too long. But if I go back and revisit this, I could make the skull's eyes glow with warg energy, as if, yeah, the skull has been activated almost. That would be quite cool. The skull with the Ulgo symbol on it. And now I'm just painting up the eye sockets, because it's way easier with this little brush than with the big bulk brush I have here. Not being gentle with my brushes today. And yeah, this sandstone technique I'm using here is my own invention. I could recommend using Seraphim Sepia instead as the shade for sandstone, but I actually prefer the nice warm look you get from using the Reichland Flesh shade. So if you would like a very sandy look, I would go with the sepia, because that dries in a yellow hue rather than a red one. I'm just pressing down the brush into all these crevices, so I get a lot of paint down there. Oh, not a lot, but nice coverage is what I meant to say. Now we are getting to the shading part. Right. So I'm just gonna give this a good shake. Shake, shake, shake. And then I'm gonna glob the big one into this thing and just liberally pour it around. Give it some nice depth. Normally I would advise against having an open bottle of shade. We've seen the endless memes of that. But I've yet to tilt one over. I'm usually quite controlled when I'm painting and not flopping around too much. And I don't have a cat or anything like that. So yeah, but as I was saying, this shade, you just need to work it around and into all the crevices, yeah, you can be quite liberal with it. Manage the flow a bit. You can tilt the miniature so the shade goes the way you want it. I've seen a lot of tutorials on how to paint on different channels, and there are great ones out there. You have quite a fun young guy like Miniac, who's a great miniature painter, much better than me, and he is much more controlled in painting shade, but I find that I get more done if I just get it done. So, and you have Luke of Luke's Affordable Painting Service, who is also quite a great painter. He's also very fast in everything he does. So, if you need more techniques and little guides, you can check out his channel. I think I'll leave a link in the description. He also makes great cheap and easy terrain, and I don't have the space in my apartment to make all sorts of terrain at the moment. My biggest problem with having estimated this at half an hour is I'm already looking down at 10 minutes, and yeah, that's only actually 5 minutes of actual painting because I had to explain everything first, but this is taking quite a long time, and also the shade will take approximately 20 minutes to dry completely, even in the heat of my lamps. So we got that to work against us. But the shade, it's every miniature painter's best friend. You can really improve on everything you paint by just giving it a shade, because it adds that depth you can't add, or perhaps you can, but I at least can't really add it in any other way than giving it a shade, and then afterwards giving it a highlight. And that highlight can just be a light dry brush, or rather heavy dry brush if you like that look, but it's all about what kind of result you're going for, what kind of look you like, because there's some of the really complicated and intricate painting designs that are really up at the moment that looks like some sort of what is he called, the Blanche guy, his paintings. So they're very intricate and very colorful. They almost look like some sort of 80s rock band posters. But I don't actually like that for miniatures. That's great for display pieces, which are actually more artworks than anything else, but I don't think that works very well for an army. For that, I like this very gritty and simple look, which you've seen in my own army. So I think I'm actually gonna go back on what I said about painting one thing at a time, because I will not be able to highlight this base for quite a while. That is wet Alot. So first, Incubi Darkness, we're gonna shake that thing because it's a bit since I used that. And we're gonna go with this big brush again. Put some on my wet palette, get that nice milky consistency. Some really thick milk here. And we're just gonna glob it on. Glob it on, baby, glob it on. I saw somebody else do this on the Warhammer Facebook page, I believe. One of them, at least. Making this into a really nice green marble effect, and I thought that was some of the coolest things I've ever seen. And really creative, because I would have just painted this as brass, because it's the 8-pointed Star of Chaos, and usually that just means that it's brass for some reason. Khorne is very fond of brass, but there are other gods in the pantheon. But I thought it was a really nice spin to make it marble. It's almost getting a bit foamy now. This is also a really cheap terrain feature. Is it like 10 quid or something? It's really cheap. So it's also a great terrain feature to practice on, actually. And you could always strip this in out in the English-speaking countries. You have something called simple green. I believe you can put this in, or what's it called, the brown soap thing, to clean it off again and try again if you painted less than perfectly. But I don't strip models. I think it takes too long to do, and I don't ever get it just right and nicely cleaned afterwards. So if at first you don't succeed, try again. That should be any painter's motto, because anyone worth his salt in the painting game has failed more times than you have tried. That's a fact. If you ever want to get good at something, you have to submit to failing. That actually goes for anything in life. Oh, even with the streaks, it's kind of looking great. I think it gets that almost marble feel already, because I have streaked it like this. Beginner piece, because there are a lot of edges on everything here, so it takes dry brush really well. Then dry brush is your friend, because that's a really simple technique, and it's anyone's game to master that one. Even if I miss just a little bit, the shade will get into that little crease or crevasse or whatever, and that will darken it down, and that'll give it a bit of nuance as well. And that's not a bad thing. We want to have a bit of play in it, so it looks natural. And that's why I don't do it that tidy as well in my army, because I like that bit of natural feel, that a little bit of chaos goes a long way when painting, because you don't want it to be perfect. That's what is it? Is it the saying that perfect is the enemy of good, or something like that? Already it's starting to look like something. What? Nobody knows. Everybody asking. Nobody knows. I had considered going for a bit of blending here, going dark, lighter, very light, but I don't think I'll do that with the time, because we're already at 20 minutes. That means minus the 5 minutes I used for explanation, that gives me 15 more minutes to play with this thing. And I'm not gonna be able to do that, I think. That's a bit optimistic. That is really bright. Wow. That looks like candy. We could have done these skulls in a different color, but I think I'm gonna go and pick them out with a yellow highlight at the very end to make them stand out a bit more. Ideally, I should have sculpted them to be like orc skulls. That would have been really cool to do. I've seen some really creative ones putting orc shields and symbols on instead. That's great. I love it when people get really creative with kit bashing and converting. If you saw my army showcase, you've noticed that I've converted quite a bit of my own units and head swapped a bit, so you get some diversity into your army. That's a nice way to personalize your army and make it very different from every other guy out there playing Orcs, because Orcs are a very popular faction. Nice bit of coverage here now. This is looking very bright and cartoonish at the moment, but that will subside a bit when we start shading this thing, in case you were wondering. You can't just use only the colors you love. You have to think about color theory a bit, just a little bit. Because if you want to, I don't know, make purple your focus color in your army, you could offset it quite nicely with a bit of orange, as I've done with all the Fireslayer beards that hang from my Orcs armor, weaponry, and yeah, stuff like that. You could also do it with a black, and black is a nice contrast to most things, which accentuates all the nice little detailing. So yeah, that's also an option. One could argue that this is a bit of waste of time, because it will never be in a height where you can see the belly of the beast, so to speak. But I just like to have these nice edges, just for my own sake, and this will take a bit longer, and I do apologize for that. But this will probably be more like 45 minutes, an hour in a bit. Yeah, I think so. Perhaps even a bit longer than that. If it get any longer than 45 minutes for the main part of this video, I will try to figure out how to speed up the video, make that little fast forward effect, so you don't have to wait forever to figure out what I'm doing. I don't know if you can really see it on the camera, but the sandstone color is getting really nice and warm at the moment. It looked like something from Prince of Persia, which I actually thought was an quite alright movie, despite all the the critique it got. And I don't mind that this becomes a bit dark, because that'll just accentuate all the little streaks. I'm gonna do it on it afterwards a lot more, which is a win-win in my book. And I'm trying to make this, oh sorry, I bumped you again, to make this piece a testament to the fact that you don't have to be neat or perfect to make beautiful terrain and even miniatures. I wouldn't recommend something like the Free Guild army if you're not wanting to be nice and smooth with everything on your minis, because that army is detailed as you wouldn't believe. I tried to get some of them because I thought a small contingent of guards for my village project would be cool, but that fell through very fast because those guys, they have details coming out the wazoo, and I'm not painting 100 of those guys with all those details. I have the highest amount of respect for anybody who does do that, but I'm not gonna be one of those guys. Sorry. Already this is looking great, spooky and dark. I thought this little spooky boy tower would be a nice little addition now that it's just been Halloween. We're gonna need a bit more on this brush. Oh, you can take some from the top. And that's what I talked about before. You need to manage this a bit, because this wants to go everywhere and nowhere sometimes. Ta-da! This looks spooky. And I actually personally already feel like this looks great. Of course, this is not going to win you a crystal brush or anything like that. I have no illusions about that. But it's nice to get something done. I haven't touched a brush for almost, since the last video I did on the wet palette. That's the last time I touched a brush. So something like a month ago. And that's too long for any painter. You really need to try and get some painting in every day, or every other day, at least every week if you want to get something done. Otherwise you might as well consign yourself to not getting anything done. Which is also why I chose to make this video about painting, because I wanted to show that, as I said before, it doesn't have to be neat. You can just get something done, and that's really nice for your painting self-esteem, if you want to call it that. And this is at the moment quite see-through, but I like that because this will make a very nice natural blend between the darker parts in the deepest recesses. And now that I add the Biltan shade, Biltan green, it will accentuate that even more. And when I then go over it and highlight it with mood green, it will have a very nice effect. So sometimes the whole, it's a thin coat and you can see the primer through, that's not always an issue. In my humble opinion, you can actually work it to your advantage. This is quite a thick shit. Is this dried out? No, it works yet. It still works. Even though it is a bit thick, it's not that smooth at all anymore. I think I'm just gonna ditch this thing. That's done. Give this a good shake. Bloop. We're just gonna glop it on this skull so we get all the nice little detailing, and this skull as well. And then I'm just gonna work it around. Yeah, like so. If you have any sort of speed painting tricks you do, please let me know in the comment section below, and if I find them to be really good, I will try and do it in another video, so we can get a move on with my army, for example. And if you just want to paint something very quickly and just get, one color on perhaps and just make it vaguely resemble something, You can always use what I call the one color, one shade technique, where you just, as I've done now, one base coat and just one shade of the same color on top of it. Or if it's Stormcast, paint it the different colors you want, base coat it, and then wash the whole miniature in Nuln oil, the black one, which gives it a nice contrast. And you will have a pretty good looking army with minimal effort. And you can almost crank out an entire army in just about a weekend or something if you have that amount of time to do it. So that's something to consider if you're a beginner, or you're one like me who has procrastinated for a bit and have one or more armies just lying around. That's a nice little trick to do it. One color, one shade. TM, Maniacal Miniature, you heard it here first. Now this shade is actually still drying. So is the top shade, and the middle shade is, of course, because we just applied it, still drying. But look at how great that looks, just already, with minimal effort. If you just left this as is, and just painted the metal bits on the bottom and the top, you could actually fill this no problem, and it would look quite alright. Not amazing, but it would look okay. Much of the pre-painted terrain you can buy everywhere, it's much worse looking than this thing. You have to be very careful with not thinning your metal paints too much on your wet palette, because it's highly pigmented because of the metal. So not straight from the pot, and I'm gonna get this somewhat controlled around here. And because I've chosen this really dark, really cold blue as the marble effect, the very cold color that silver is offsets it quite nicely. And that's again a bit of the color theory I tell myself that I know a bit of. I'm not in any way art educated, but I did have art class in school and paid a bit of attention because I found it exciting that I could use it for something other than painting paintings. It actually has applicability in miniature painting. Truth be told, this is much more detailed than I actually first noticed. It has a nice amount of detailing to it, but that also means that it takes a bit longer to paint than at first estimated. Especially because this ring is integrated into the star, which makes it a bit finicky to get around. I'm starting to regret I have shaded this entire thing in one go, because some of the shade down here is still drying. I'm allowing some of the shade to dry here while I paint around it, because I don't mind having these old school harsh lines between each little element of the model. I actually find that to be aesthetically pleasing, so that's alright with me. I know it's a bit different to paint like this with a camera over your shoulder. It makes moving around a little harder, gotta admit. Usually I'm not this messy. I am a bit messy when I paint, but not this messy. I don't know if you watched my review of my wet palette, but this is actually the same paper from then, and it's still good to go. Now going on 2 months, so that's a bit wild. Really excited about this palette. It makes it so much more relaxing to paint, because you don't have to wet your brush all the time. it just absorbs it from the mat and or this foam layer instead, which is absolutely amazing. Because having to go from your paint to your water bottle or water cup or vice versa, either you're watering down your paint or you're contaminating your paint with water. In this way, it's all contained on the wet palette, and I really like that. And I personally don't blend my own colors because I really like consistency. I get that that feature pieces and one-offs, you can go all sorts of crazy with that, but when you're building an army or painting terrain features that need to all fit together, you should want consistency, so you don't have terrain pieces that are sandstone and some that are look like limestone and some that look like obsidian, and that looks weird on a table. You need some sort of theme going on, in my opinion. Look at how great that looks. Already now it looks very good. So after I've done this big ring here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mix that Incubi Darkness with the shade, and I'm gonna go over the entire top of this thing and just fix all the mistakes I've just made because of the camera being right there and constantly the arm holding the camera, it's hitting the bottom of my brush, makes it swerving out of control. So we have a little brush accident every now and then, but that's fine. It just takes a bit longer, and I can show you how I fix my mistakes, because I also make mistakes. And the most important thing I could say is you need to not be discouraged by making mistakes, because even the really good ones, the great painters, make mistakes. Not that I'm a great painter, but I do all right to my needs. And next week I actually considered doing a video on some future projects. They are way down the line, but at the moment at least, that might change in the future. But on future projects like my village project, I had some modular tiles in mind for them, and I've drawn some sketches for that, and also a new dwarven carrack, because I've learned a lot from making the first one, so I could give the first one away or sell it and use that to fund my second one and make it improved with more columns and tiles on in the throne room, and make it so that I could add additional tiles to it, so it could be like a procedurally generated dwarven stronghold for D&D or something like that. That would be really neat. And for the shade I use Agrax Earth Shade, because that makes the metal look nice and dirty, which is a look I like when it comes to Aurochs. And next I gonna have to paint all the little metal bits on this thing down here, but first I'm gonna dry brush it. And I'm gonna do that in 2 stages. So that's gonna, I have somewhat abandoned the super quick paint here, the speed paint, to a somewhat more manageable pace, and adjusted my expectations for the paint job. And paint on my paper here and wipe it off. I'm just gonna go over this thing with a dry brush. Just a rough dry brush. It doesn't have to be in any sort of shape or way perfect. You just need to accentuate some of the raised edges, and it will look great when it's done, because it will add to that depth we talked about earlier. And also, I just want to give a shout out to our good friend Uncle Adam at the Tabletopminions, which is actually a guy I've been watching for a few years now, since I got back into the hobby. And he makes some great videos on what to do if you hit a wall with your painting, or you have I think he calls it hobby burnout. Sorry guys, my camera just died, so I had to charge it for a few hours. It doesn't charge that fast. But we're back again, and we are going to continue with our dry brush, this base. So of course now, for example, the shade has of course dried because it had a lot of time to dry, while my camera was out to count, so that's a bit of a disappointment, but it's fine. So I think that's it for the sandry dust and the raglan flesh shade. They're done for now. I'm gonna go on to the lighter dry brush. Lighter color, but I think I'm gonna go for a harsher dry brush. So lighter color, that's the Terminatus stone. Oh yeah, no need to shake that one. It's dry as you wouldn't believe. So let's get some of that onto this thing and just liberally apply it to this thing. Wow, that's really white. I hope it darkens down a bit. I can't remember it was this light when I used it on my realm gates. Yeah, we will have to see. Otherwise I'll have to go back and paint this again. Of course, now that I've applied it this heavily, it will take away some of the previous coloring we've done with both sandry dust and also with the shade. But I like having different both these dry paints. They add a bit of texture as well, but different textures and different colors in stone. It gives it that really natural stony look, because most stones out in the wild aren't just inherently one color. So I like this little nuance game I can get going. Of course, now I've painted over most of these cheat colors I put on the runes on the base, so I would have to look them up again before I finish this. Gonna give it a bit of a harsh dry brush right here on the top of the skulls, so we can lure the eye towards them when it stands on the table as a feature. That'll, and around these nice cracks, I'll give it a bit as well to really emphasize that this is an ancient structure. I love that this makes it really look sun bleached and like a millennia old structures long forgotten by civilization. And I actually think that this harsh dry brush actually came out for the better. I think this is looking quite good. Now I'm calling that stone done. That looks great. I like that. This might have been a lot easier to paint in sub-assemblies with the star as its own piece, or even the base as well, because it's only 3 pieces and they're quite easy to slot together after the fact. So my advice to you would be, if you're planning on painting this thing, just prime it in 3 pieces and paint it in 3 pieces, because I'm making this harder than it has to be. Now we're just gonna paint these little metal details. And I won't bother doing the sides of these little things because oh, hit you again, because the shade and the typhus corrosion and rust and all that will actually cover most of these borders, because I am quite liberal with it. I like a bit of rust to have rubbed off on the nearby terrain. I think that looks cool and dirty. That's a look that's quite good on terrain, this not too dressed look, so it doesn't need to be perfect. Another little feature I like with this terrain piece is actually that these things, they look like literal iron jaws, which fits very nice with my themed army. Which kind of makes me regret I'm not painting these purple like the rest of my army. I might go back and do that later. As I was saying earlier in this video, that's the cool thing about speed painting something, just getting something to an acceptable standard, is you can always revisit it and come back later and add to the detailing and clean it up a bit. Also, when you learn new techniques and when you get better, that's a fun little thing to do. I have revisited many figures over the years. With wet blending is a very nice example. When I learned that a few months ago, that's quite new to me. Something I'm trying to master. And with the wet palette, that has almost become an easy thing. So if you really want to try and master wet blending, I can only recommend wet palette. I hadn't actually noticed at my first run around that there are actual skulls on this piece. Of course, that's my own mistake. It is a GW piece, so one can expect that there will be some skulls. But I might just go over them quickly with what's it called, the bleached bone or something like that. Screaming Skull is the name now. That looks fine. I like this lead belcher for everything made by savages and orcs and primitive races, because it has this very nice dark bolt metal, gunmetal kind of color, which is nice for the purpose. There is a lot to paint silver here. And when I go over this with Agrax Earthshade in a bit, it will pool at the edge between the stone and the metal ring, and that will make for a very nice transition between the two, I'm hoping. But again, I also went with a red shade, the Raglan Flesh Shade, that has a reddish tone. It's a reddish brown, one could call it. And I did that because I knew the primary colors on this thing would be greenish and blue. So to make a contrasting color scheme without being too obvious about it, it offsets very nicely. again, something as a, you know, like if you really enjoy blue armor for your dudes, you should consider giving them yellow insignias or yellow capes or something like that, to really accentuate the blue in that case. So when picking your color scheme, I would suggest that you look on a color wheel and figure out where in this the spectrum you want to be, and have a nice balance between cool and warmer colors as well. Yeah, and this doesn't really have any sort of texture to it. It gets it from the lead belcher. It has so much pigment that you can actually see little granulates in it, which I like for iron, because that's what unpolished iron looks like. In any paint job, this is these little detail parts, the finishing touches. That's what takes that extra time. And I could have painted this just like stone, as you see here. It's fine. It could have been stone, like something chiseled from stone to resemble metal, and I could have went with that, but I just realized I would like to add a bit of extra detailing to this thing now that I already have it in my hands. And for those one or two of you who actually watch this from one end to the other, I commend you and thank you for sticking through. I hope it is informational and you learned something, or at least are entertained. This is annoying me greatly right now because my brush cannot go like this, so I'll have to tilt it the other way, which is another very good reason why you should have built this in sub-assemblies. I'm really excited to actually see if it works with the rust that I've planned for this. I haven't done it a whole lot. I'm quite new to making these rusted iron effects, and I've become quite enthralled with that whole Resa rust and typhus corrosion. It's so simple to make that eroded and rusted iron look with those two paints. You just dab some of the Resa rust on and then well, kind of drown it in typhus corrosion, and just lightly dab some of the typhus corrosion off so that the orange shine through. You don't want too much of that orange to shine through, because it's quite stark in the color, and it becomes quite almost unrealistic. And that sounds weird because real rust can actually be quite orange, but it just feels off in a miniature that isn't otherwise hyper realistic. But if you went for a hyper realism, you could of course go for that thing. Had I not paid any attention to the metal rings or the metal detailing in total, I would probably have been able to do this in less than an hour actually. But these details are everywhere when you first decide to go for the metal to be actual metal and not just carved rock looking like metal. It accumulates. It actually kind of keeps revealing itself to be more and more than you first thought. So something to consider. If you're really going for that speed painting, this might not be the way to go about it. If you want to get something done, then skimp on some of the detailing. At least not be such OCD about the edges, then just blob something on so it looks rough and tough. Ideally, you would want to drag your brush rather than push it, because it's better for the brush itself, but it's kind of hard to really get in there in this angle because of this ridiculous smoke. Nah, it's not ridiculous. It's beautiful. All smoke is beautiful. I don't discriminate. Magic smoke especially. Oh, I cannot wait to get on with the technical paints. That's my favorite thing to do on a model. I love adding textures and tufts and stuff like that. It really adds to the realism of a figure. Be that a terrain feature or an actual model. When you add battle scars to an armor or shield and add tufts to the base and textures to the base like rocks and sand and stuff like that, that's where I really enjoy myself. That was actually the same with the characters. That's the most enjoyable thing I've made for myself. When I eventually get enough money to move to a place where I can get a workshop, I will start making terrain regularly. It's going to stand very prominently on the table when it's in use, so might as well use an extra half an hour now. And I am speeding up quite a lot. Normally I would paint a lot slower and more controlled than this, but I did promise that I would paint quickly, although this was not as quick as I first estimated. I'm still trying to be as fast as I can, rather than savor every little stroke as I have a tendency to do. I do enjoy painting a lot, I must say, but these metal rims, they feel like a chore. This is not fun to paint. It's actually quite annoying, because they have these little edges that line up to everything, to the skulls, to the tiles on the ground, and yeah, it's a hassle. That's the base. Now we're gonna shade that thing and get on with it. For this I want to be a bit more controlled, because I have already painted some of this with a different color, and I want to keep that nice clean blue look. So guys, I'm back now after a delay. Apparently my camera went out halfway through shooting this phase. I'm really sorry about that, hadn't noticed at all, it didn't give me any warning. So what you missed was that after I were done shading the ring, I shaded this entire bottom of metal, and I just gave it a good thick wash of Agrax Earthshade to bring that nice brownish metal color out. So that's what you missed there. Another thing I said about that was just you can be quite generous with that, as it gives you these nice dark lines around the edges, which serve as a nice marker, making the entire thing pop more, both the stone and the metal parts. Also, the next thing I did was I dry brushed this entire column of energy. What I did was I took the mood green, which is the most neon of all the GW greens, and I just put some on my brush, and then I wiped it off on my tissue, and then I just went contra to the contours of the beam here, and really just being sloppy with it, bringing out all these nice skulls and these little whirls going around in circles of the column here, and that was super simple. It took like 20 seconds to do the entire column, and you can see now it's really popping and looking very sinister. So that's what I did right after shading it. So that's what you missed at the moment, and now I'm on to making the rest of this this marble effect, and I'm just gonna try and experiment a bit with dry brushing the original color of the star, the incubi darkness. And what I'm gonna do is just bring a bit of the lightness back out on the edges of these cracked stones. So to give it a bit more nuance when I add the lighter colors in a few minutes. So that's what we're about now. It gives it this nice play in color, which is great. And that's also a little bonus detail, and you could totally skip this step. But I thought, now this video has taken so long, and the camera cut out during some of my process, so you lost about, well, 10 minutes, I think, of me doing the column and the base metals. So now I just thought, well, to Sigmar with it, we're just gonna do a bit of extra detailing here, just for fun. This video is going to be much longer than I anticipated anyways, so might as well make it a bit nice. This is very minor detailing, and it might seem like you're doing nothing when you do this step, but when you watch it in a different light later, you will definitely see a little change in the color. I'm not gonna do the underside because that won't matter at all, especially when you think about theory of light, and that some people, they paint their models like light hit every surface on the model at the same time, and that's not how natural light works. Of course, you could argue that this entire bottom should be have this oscillating lighting effect from the magic, so it would radiate green on both the bottom and the top. But seeing as this was trying to to be some sort of speed paint, I will totally skip that that step, because that will take a very long time, and I'm still learning the oscillating effect. What I'm gonna do instead is concentrate on making these additional lines on this thing, which I will show you now. So what I'm gonna do is just make some random lines across this thing, and I'm just gonna stick to painting it in one direction, to give this feeling of there being veins through the stone, just as there is with marble. And granted, the word I might have been looking for this entire time might actually be obsidian, because this is some really dark green marble if it were marble, but that's how I best knew how to explain it. And already now you can see a lot of contouring in the rock here. I'm just gonna try and do a really sneaky edge highlight around the edges, as to bring the edges and holes forth a bit more. And you can already see now the difference it makes. Just gonna go like this. Yeah, I think that's a bit on the light side, but I think I'm gonna stick with that, actually, not making it too heavy. And then I'm actually gonna go a bit further and add some Sybarite green, I think it's called. Yeah, Sybarite green as an extra highlight after this one, to bring it out even more. So what I'm doing here is just touching lightly on some of the edges and not all of them, and just making it, yeah, a bit random, and focusing around all the little nice detailing in the stone to make it pop even more, because that's really what we want to do. We want all these nice little detailing to pop, so we don't. Yeah, that looks great, I think. Definitely add a little pizzazz right here. Feels a bit lacking right there. Of course, I could hit these dots with a little metal feel. This entire brim might actually have been metal all along. Oh my lord. I think that is it. That is actually metal. Yeah, I'm not thinking of going back and revisit that right now. That might be something for a later point in time. So that's something I definitely would have done had I noticed at the first run. But that's also something I talked about earlier. The whole while you're painting it, you realize there's all sorts of extra detailing you hadn't noticed on the first go around, because it's so hard to see when it isn't painted. So and I'm just gonna do all the edges of the stars, and then we are now I'm just gonna do the sides of them as well, but not the underside. And then we're just gonna do the rust effect, and we're gonna kind of call it done. The really hard thing is actually making something imperfect, because in our minds we would actually want all these lines to line up, but it's really hard to master the whole making things perfectly imperfect. And that's something that's taken me a long time, because I like things orderly and yeah, with a nice rhythm and system to it. I think this is going great actually, and I'm not in any way, shape or form a master at this effect. I'm still learning, but I can only recommend watching as many photos online and trying to crack or decipher the technique people have used, and watch many more videos on an effect or painting style you would like to learn. Today the internet is a great additional source of information for new players just getting started, or new hobbyists. So yeah, there are a ton of great painters out there, and even just experimental ones. Sometimes you just need to try something. So yeah, that looks great. Alrighty then, we're on to the sides of it. There we are able to correct some of the spillover from when we did the ring, both the base color and the shade. And here we're just gonna put some rough lines down, because it's not a focal point of the miniature, so that won't really matter once we're done, but it adds a bit of extra depth to the miniature, making the sides not feel so flat. We will paint some off to the side, so it will look like naturally occurring lines in the stone. And I'll say this, if you really want to go for this hyper realism, you really want to go as slowly as possible with highlighting, building up in tone and color as you go along. So you start with a really close color to the base color, and or perhaps even the base color on top of the shade, and you build up from there, just doing small little steps up from there, and ending in a teensy bit of white at the edge of your highlights. Then you will get a really nice realistic look on the stone, or any other thing. You can do it on clothing and armor and stuff like that. And white is typically an alright color to finish almost everything except black, really. For black you would want to go gray or a very light grayish blue at the end, depending on what sort of feel you want to invoke. Possible. I just wanted to give you a feel of how fast one can actually paint a pretty decent piece. Oh, just was a bit rough there, the head of this brush. When I'm buying brushes next time, I definitely won't be going for the GW ones. I think they are terrible quality. The heads keep coming off and the hairs keep splitting even with care. I would definitely try and go for the Kandinsky series or the Winsor & Newton, because they have a really good wrap, and the reviews of them are fantastic. So yeah, I haven't tried them personally, but I definitely want to give them a try. And now we're done with this color. We will definitely move on to the Sybarite. Only 3 colors left, and the next thing is the rust. So we're just gonna do this right quick. Try and be very careful when doing this step. And why I chose the Sybarite green is because it's very close in its I want to say primary color, but that's not really the word. It has really kind of a nice tone, which matches with the incubi darkness. It has this bluish green quality to it, which makes it perfect for highlighting incubi. There we go. I hope you can really see the difference that this makes, and that you agree that it was a good idea to do this extra little step to really make it pop a bit more. Just here, and just make these nice thin veins going across, preferably in the same direction, at least on each slab, to make it feel a bit natural. You can do some creative, take some creative liberties if if that's what you want. But oh, I got a bit much paint on there. Yeah, I noticed. I even knew it before I did it. This might actually, if you do a very large contrast, as I might have wanted to shade this down a bit. I don't know if I'll do another shade of Coelian green shade, because that was the first shade I used here, just to tone this down a bit and give it a bit more nuance. I could also give it a glaze, a green glaze or blue glaze even, depending on which finished color look I would like to go for, because this is getting to be a bit contrasty at the moment. I like this over here, but this feels very high contrast at the moment, and I'm not entirely sure about that, because it makes it feel a bit like camouflage, actually, at least to my eyes. It looks like urban camo at the moment, and I am not sure I really dig that. And already I'm doing more highlights than I think I would. And that's the whole thing about painting as well. You're gonna do, you're gonna set out and try and do something, and you're gonna realize halfway through that perhaps you want to try something different, or oh, you just touched something right there with the brush and that actually made some kind of cool effect, or yeah, the color was lighter or darker or some other hue than you had expected, and you're just gonna roll with it, because honestly, who wants to strip their models every few hours and start over when it's not a display piece or even a competition piece? Touch the brush at the edges at an angle to make them really pop. That's just another thing with painting. You can always get better, and I feel like personally that I am improving as well all the time. Each time you paint, you should hopefully get a little bit better than the last time, And after painting for a few years, you always think that the models you did a few years ago, they look like, well, let's be honest, not great. And that's completely natural, I feel, to feel this progression. At least in my opinion, you should have some sort of progression. You should not be terrible at painting your whole life. Of course, some just don't have the necessary patience, perhaps, or the necessary hand stability. That could be because of age or disease or nerves or whatever. So you shouldn't beat yourself up about that. There are a ton of great companies that cheaply will paint your armies for you, if that's not something you're into. If you're just into the gaming aspect as well and think, I don't want to build all my little chess pieces like some sort of barbarian, I want to be able to play right now, then you can go ahead and contract the painting of your army and your scenery. There are some really great ones out there. You can just Google commission painting and a lot of different companies will come up. Really just gripping the entire thing with my hand and using my hand as a pivot point to really give me some additional control. And as you can see, I'm leaning on my other hand and both my elbows are solidly on the table to give me that extra stability. Because there's no reason to make this harder than it already is. This is especially poignant if you have been to the gym and been training your arms. You can get a bit jittery and a bit shaky, and I wouldn't recommend painting in that situation, or really adding some additional stability to your painting hand. Now it's just for the center, and we are off to do the rust. And this is the part where I really want to concentrate. I'm not getting too much on there because I just want to touch all these little rivets to make it obvious that this is not metal. We have decided this is cut from stone. We want to line the original lines here and maybe do a bit extra around the scars on the stone here. Little cracks to really make them pop. The eye socket as well. I'm just going to do the lower half to make it seem really sad. So I'm just going to go along the lines here really lightly. I'm just going to touch the whole thing here. Oh, just went a little too hard there. Really lightly. We're just going to go along these lines we have already made to give it a bit of play here. There we go. And that's the nice thing about doing surfaces, especially these GW terrain and for example the Iron Jaws, and as a matter of fact their entire newer model range, they have really nice textures to them, making them super forgiving to paint. Not to pay, they're still quite expensive. Except the new starting collecting boxes that's been around for, well, it's a few years now I think, and their Christmas specials, they're the Battle Force boxes, which are super great value, especially if you can get them from your friendly neighborhood gaming store. The newer models, they're so easy to paint that even a complete amateur can turn out quite a great paint job, just because they have all these nice edges and ridges that make them really acceptable towards dry brushing, which I mentioned earlier in my video is a very nice beginner technique. Yeah, we're just gonna dab it around in here just a little bit to give that. Nope, we need a bit more paint. And we're just gonna drag it lightly slightly then, because now there's more paint in the brush. Yeah, that looks great. Do some at the bottom here. Oh, we need to get into the nose as well. There. Yeah, that looks great. Now we're just missing a bit around the edges here. I just done some of it, and I'm just gonna finish that up, and we're onwards. We're almost done now. And we're just gonna do some very light touching this thing, some random directions, giving it a nice dynamic feel. Making sure to accentuate the little cracks again. And I talk from experience when I say it's the home stretch where you make all the mistakes. So it's really now that you need to focus a lot, and really concentrate not to getting too excited about finishing up, because yeah, that's when the mistakes happen. And you have to go back and finish and touch up and finish. It's a nightmare sometimes. So now we're done with the whole marble effect, and I think personally that looks great for what it is. A relatively fast paint job. We're looking at about 2 hours and some minutes now, I think, painting this entire thing, and already now it looks quite good. So now we're done with that, we're gonna go on with the rust, and this is a dry paint, so we're just gonna go with the dry brush. And we're gonna get some on the bristles here, and as you can see, that's a quite stark orange, so we're just gonna control it a bit. I've gotten a bit of paint in the furrow, that's not so good, and I'm just gonna dab it onto the metal, and it will look very powerful at the moment, but hopefully we will be able to make that subside just a little bit. But as I said very early on in this video, when I explained the whole reasoning behind my color choices, I have chosen to make this a very rusty metal, because rusty metal, it's orange, and the other colors I went for was green, so that makes it a very nice contrast, making both things pop even more, both the metal ring, but also definitely this whole marble obsidian thing, whatever you want to call it. We definitely don't want to block out entirely our paint job, but I like it to be very nice and rusty, having it look like it haven't been activated for some time, this entire thing, not making it look like there's been some mage casting spells on it every other day. That's a bit weird, I think, even for the mortal realms. Just gonna wipe a bit of it off there. There we go, that's the top side. We're just dabbing away. Not the thing the young kids do nowadays. Dabbing with a brush is something different entirely. What I really just want to hit is the sides here, because the corrosion will pool at the bottom. So if we just make sure that the cracks are really nice and rusted, and yeah, the tops of this really looks weathered a lot, that's fine. At the moment, oh, I hit the skull there. That's a rookie mistake. Got most of it out there. That's another tuft. I think that's going to be my watchword from now on. If I make a mistake, I'm just going to put a tuft there. So if I paint someone's eyeball too wrong, tuft in the eye. And now on to the typhus corrosion, which is a technical, and we're going to give that a good shake. And this have a very nice shadyish quality, so I'm going to go with the shade brush. Haven't got the foggiest if this will disrupt my brush, but I'm going to go for it. And what we're going to do is just dab this on and try and control it a bit more than the shade. And this will dry up very much more than any shade, leaving some very nice textured. It has a very nice texture to it. The pigment in it is really great and makes it feel very tactile. It makes it look like it would give you blood poisoning just touching it, which is, I guess, not a great thing, but in a model it looks great. Again, we're just going to control it a bit, making it, taking the orange down a bit. And you can always take this very light and go darker with it along the way, but you really want some of that orange to shine through, because that was the kind of the whole point. So I'm just going to dab them very lightly, the orange tips here, but leave the tips as exposed. And this nice brown is bringing it back down in tone, making it feel a bit more natural. This is also a very great little technical color for if you want to make your Skaven characters or your ogre characters feel like they have really rusty and gritty weaponry, and also clothing. Actually, you can make this, if this is added without the Rust, it will actually look a bit more like mud, so you can actually stipple it on like this. This is stippling, which is actually kind of the same as a dab, but more like hitting it with the bristles rather than doing light swipes or whatever you want to call it. And that's great for making mud effect on the bottom of a leather cloak, for example, or on the boots of your orcs. It always weirds me out a bit seeing orcs and aurochs, if you want to call them that, with perfectly clean leather boots. That seems wrong somehow. Oi, we will bash these kids over here in just a few minutes when we have wiped our boots. Yeah, that seems wrong, doesn't it? So, yeah, we went a bit heavy here, and that's not great. I'm not a great fan of that. That was my mistake. I'm just gonna drag it ever so lightly along here to make the insides rusty as well. And once you've really applied this corrosion, you really gotta submit to it and just roll with it, because this is really hard stuff to get off again. So we're just adding and adding more of it, and we can always stipple it or staple it or whatever you want to call it with the Rust afterwards, just to bring even more orange out of it. I'm gonna drop that in there, and I'm just gonna try a different brush because this is not going great. Adapt and overcome. Improvise. Adapt and overcome. Yup, that works great. And normally I wouldn't recommend just putting your brushes into a pot of water like that. It's really bad for the bristles, but these brushes have earned my ire, so I'm thinking of changing them very soon. As soon as I can afford it anyway, and because I'm gonna need almost an entirely new set, so that will cost a bit if you want to get some better brushes, which I really do. I haven't actually, since these, felt like spending a ton of brushes, but a builder is only as great as his tools, and the same kind of applies to most painters, at least. I've seen someone paint great with some shabby dollar store brushes, but that's more the exception than the rule, I think. Well, this is looking great, isn't it? I like it. I like it. It really brought out the contrast. But this might have great benefit from oh, we forgot those little things, the little knobs there, the little rivets, the rivulets. Just gonna wipe it off here and just dab it. Dab it, dab it, dab it, dab it. There we go. Was a little extra, and we're just gonna do the tips. Just to bring out the orange a bit more. Just around all these little rivets, because I'm committing. Just making those pop a bit more. See how that helped? I think it did at least. And I could also do this to the base actually, because this has become very brownish and kind of flat. I had actually put on a bit more than I would have liked. So I'm just gonna do a light randomized dabbing of this. Just give this a light dry brush of silver. I don't know. I'm on the fence about that. I think I won't do it in this video, but let me know in the comments if you think I should highlight all the little cracks and edges of the little, I don't know what, spikes on the little collar thing. If you think that's the way to go, or if I should just leave it be. If you think this looks great, I would be very happy to know, because this is a bit of an experiment. I haven't actually used this rust color all that much. I've been experimenting a bit on my giants, or gargants as they're called now. You can see the pictures of that on my Instagram if you want to see that. So that kind of looks alright, I think. I think we should just do a teensy bit more, just 5 more minutes, Mom. Just a bit more around these. I think that won't make the largest difference in the time for this video, but will make it pop that much more. So we're just gonna, I cannot really figure out if I should put it into the cracks or just around it like a highlight. We're gonna do around them, and we can always add silver into the cracks afterwards. Just light orange feel. Yeah, I think we're gonna call that. No, I forgot the bottom again. Forgot the bottom again. We just need to just bring these out. Just bring these out. Just a little bit. Just a little bit of mica. Just around the edges here, because that became a bit too brown for my taste. So I will leave the magic symbols off for now, and I will paint them up at some later point because those are entirely optional, and I need to figure out what colors the different realms are, and I'm gonna add that also to my Instagram. But for now, we're gonna call this thing done. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you liked the color scheme I chose. I hope you liked the techniques, and hopefully you learned something new and thought it was good progress in the time allotted. Yeah, I'm quite happy with it, and I think it looks all right. Oh, just one teensy little showcase more. I just wanted to show you how it next to my realm gate here. Like, that's why I chose this stone color, because I wanted it to fit in with this. I have gone a bit harder on with the last dry brush on this thing, making it a bit lighter. But I haven't on all my realm gates. I have made a bit of difference in the stone color, because all stone ain't the same. And also this guy, which is gonna go on top. I made it I wanted to make it look a bit like the smoke on his staff, so you can see how that's gonna go. Yeah, a bit of a showcase here. So I just grab it like this. Hopefully you can see and agree that this looks quite all right. Thanks again. That was it for this step-by-step tutorial on how I painted this Balefire Vortex from Games Workshop. I myself am quite happy with the results. I think it turned out great. If you'd like to see more pictures of this and the other things I paint, which isn't quite video worthy, I put it up on my Instagram, which you can check out on my YouTube channel on the banner. There's a link there to my Instagram. I just want to say I'm really sorry it didn't go up during the weekend, this video. It was the plan, and it failed because my camera battery cut out mid-recording, and that led to a whole bunch of issues with me wanting to string the video together and salvage it in some way, which I feel like I've done somewhat in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, as it helps me and my channel out quite a great deal. And yeah, you will get notified when I release new videos. And otherwise, there's just left to say, in the immortal words of Mother Teresa, be happy in the moment, that's enough. Each moment is all we need, not more. See you in my next video.